I just don't understand why he continuously commits to shows and then ends up dropping out. And especially the EVLS Prague Pro. It is one of his title sponsors, you guys. He is actually sponsored by that show. I mean, how would you feel if you were a show promoter? You're actually paying this guy. He's on the payroll, okay? And he's not going to show up at your show? I would honestly fire his ass. What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to EP09. All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back for yet another bodybuilding news update. We're going to start off today with an update from HorseMD. So, HorseMD currently sitting at 3 weeks out of the Romania Pro. Of course, we saw a very impressive version of HorseMD at last year's Romania Pro, going up against guys like Beirut Tabani, Samson Dauda, and, you know, trading some shots back and forth with those guys. Nathan Diasha in that show as well. So at 3 weeks out here, I think that he looks right on track. We're seeing some decent detail in the quads. The midsection looks dialed in. The question, I think, is going to come down to, has HorseMD made improvements in terms of the upper body? You know, the upper body is where he's really needed to put on some size in order to proportionally match his lower body. Now, from what we can see here, you know, he does look good in this shot. I actually pulled this from HorseMD's most recent YouTube video. You guys can check out that entire video in the description below. And I'm still not 100% convinced that the upper body is really brought up enough to match that lower body. And that's really the one thing that HorseMD needs to do at this point. Well, I shouldn't say that. The back is something that he definitely needed the most improvement in, especially that back double bicep. And we haven't seen any updates when it comes to that as of yet. But there's no doubt that HorseMD definitely has the structure to really compete in this current landscape of open bodybuilding and do very well. It really just comes down to a size standpoint for HorseMD. You know, he is one of the most aesthetic guys that you will find on the open circuit here. Now, in this training clip, it was leg day, so you can assume that he's lost a little bit of fullness in the upper body, you know, from the legs being so pumped. But I'm just not sure, you guys. You know, I think that he still might need a little bit more size in the upper body, like I said, to really match those proportions. But with that being said, you look at the lineup for what we currently have at the Romania Pro, he will be going up against fellow countryman Rafael Brandao, and I think that he's going to be pushing for that top spot. I mean, Rafael, of course, very aesthetic guy, but when it comes to Rafael and HorseMD standing next to each other, I do think that Rafael will have a little bit of an edge because he proportionally does match very well from upper to lower body. But that's not to say that HorseMD may not push him when it comes to conditioning, because I think that we've seen better conditioning from HorseMD at that Romania Pro last year, really, than what we saw from Rafael Brandao at the Olympia this year. That could be arguable, but you guys let me know what you think about this version of HorseMD, and do you think that maybe he needs to put on a little bit more size in the upper body? Or could this be the year that we see HorseMD make it to that Mr. Olympia stage?
We are doing the Detroit Pro.
Carlos Thomas Jr. announcing he will be competing in 2025 at the Detroit Pro. Now, we had the inaugural year for the Detroit Pro last year, where we had Martin Fitzwater come in and take home his first pro win. And this is the first competitor of the 2025 season I've seen come out and say that they will be competing at the Detroit Pro. They're actually adding Classic at the Detroit Pro this year as well, fun fact. But we may actually see Carlos Thomas Jr. on more than one stage when it comes to the 2025 season. He actually answered another question here, saying that he will compete in 22 weeks, possibly 18 weeks. So that's the interesting part. About 22 weeks from now is the Detroit Pro, but 18 weeks from now, anybody remember the show that was just around the Detroit Pro last year? That's right, the Arnold Classic Ohio, ladies and gentlemen, roughly about 18 weeks from now. So Carlos Thomas Jr. may have ambitions to actually step on that Arnold Classic stage as well. As we know right now, we have guys like Samson Dauda that'll be on that stage. Andrew Jack will be on that stage. So we may be able to add Carlos Thomas Jr. to that mix. Now, we have seen Carlos Thomas Jr. stand next to Andrew Jack in the past, actually at that Texas Pro. And This is going to be a new ball game when it comes to the next time these guys stand on stage. Andrew Jack has definitely made improvements since that time. I guess the question is going to be, has Carlos Thomas Jr. made improvements since that time? From a size standpoint, really the only thing that Carlos needed to bring up was his back, same as HorseMD. The question is, has he brought up that muscle group in particular? And he needs to really nail that conditioning factor. After that, well, we'll have to see how a guy like Carlos Thomas Jr., a shorter competitor as compared to guys like Andrew Jack and Samson Dauda, really does compare when it comes to standing on that line on potentially one of the biggest stages in all of bodybuilding. Now, I do still think that Carlos has a little bit that he needs to prove when it comes to being able to stand next to some of these guys. He was very impressive at that Texas Pro, but we really need to see him come in and nail that conditioning aspect this time. And if he does, this is a guy that is being compared to guys like Phil Heath in the past, is one comparison that I've seen. That round, full, bubbly muscle is what really defines Carlos Thomas Jr. here. So we'll see what happens at the Detroit Pro. We'll see who else is going to show up to the Detroit Pro. And then we'll see if we actually do see Carlos Thomas Jr. stand next to some of the biggest names in bodybuilding on that Arnold Classic stage. All right, we talked a little bit about the Romania Pro. Shortly after Romania is the Prague Pro, where Neckzilla is supposed to be confirmed to be competing next. Now, this is actually footage from the Dubai Muscle Pro, quite recent footage, I'll add, and it does not look like Neckzilla is in any kind of contest shape to be, around the 4 weeks out mark here. I mean, the guy looks like he's more like, 8 weeks out, 12 weeks out. Take your pick, you guys. The fact of the matter is, Neckzilla does not look ready to compete in about 4 weeks here. Now, keep in mind, we have no confirmation from Neckzilla himself that he will not be competing. This whole conversation actually started online from a post that AJ Kelly Robert made on his story, and Who is the Best Bodybuilder page on Instagram kind of ran with it. And they actually said that it was confirmed that he is not competing. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not confirmed that Neckzilla will not be competing at the Prague Pro. However, I can't see it with this kind of conditioning. So this would mark the 5th show in the 2024 season that Neckzilla ended up dropping out of. He dropped out of the New York Pro, 2 Arnold Classics, the Italy Pro. I mean, you guys, what is it going to take to get this guy on stage? I just don't understand why he continuously commits to shows and then ends up dropping out. And especially the EVLS Prague Pro. It is one of his title sponsors, you guys. He is actually sponsored by that show. I mean, how would you feel if you were a show promoter? You're actually paying this guy. He's on the payroll, okay? And he's not going to show up at your show? I would honestly fire his ass, man. I mean, you would have to. He says he's going to do your show. He's not obviously going to be there in any kind of... And even if he does show up, that's actually a good point. If he does show up, I mean, what kind of shape is he going to be in, He's not taking this show seriously. He hasn't been taking any competition seriously since he really got into the IFBB Pro League. Now, maybe it's the fact that Neckzilla doesn't feel like he needs to compete because of his social media presence. I mean, look at the stats from the reel that I just had running there. Neckzilla getting 4.9 million views on one reel alone. 39 million hearts here. I mean, I don't know. Guys, honestly, I don't know exactly what that means, but obviously this does translate over into a lot of money. And he does still have sponsors that are flying him around the world. Obviously, he's getting paid for these appearances. But still, he is definitely losing the bodybuilding fandom by continuously dropping out of these shows. I mean, it's ridiculous. So this is very frustrating for the fans of bodybuilding. This is very frustrating, I'm sure, for many industry professionals in bodybuilding that are waiting for this guy to finally show up. He's already sacrificed so much in the eyes of the fans of bodybuilding. Many people have already written this guy off, and now this would just be another reason to really just consider this guy a social media influencer and not a serious competitor when it comes to the biggest stages in the world in bodybuilding. He came over to the IFBB Pro League, and we were really hoping to see him make a huge impact here. It has not happened yet, and I am not very optimistic that it will ever happen at this point. 5 shows in 2024, dropping out of them. That's got to be some kind of record. But you guys let me know what you think about Neckzilla here. Is it just the fact that he has such a social media presence that he doesn't need to compete at this point? Let me know where Neckzilla stands with you as a fan. And let me know if you think we'll honestly ever see this guy step on stage ever again. Now, we did have RXmuscle's Siddique Farooqui actually make his way over to the Dubai Muscle Show as well, and he ended up with a very rare interview from Big Ramy. You do not typically see Big Ramy doing any interviews these days, so Sid actually gets the nod, is able to stand with Big Ramy, ask him a few questions here, and I'm sure that everyone has been waiting for the big question to be asked to Big Ramy. Are you still going to compete? Or have you finally retired from the world of professional bodybuilding?
See you in the show. That's why I come here in Muscle Dubai Show, and thank you for coming here in my booth.
Well, Big Ramy, I have to ask you, just on behalf of the bodybuilding world, how the heck are you, man? How are you? How's life been?
I'm still crazy, doing the same things. I'm still dieting, still training. I'm still crazy.
This is the first time, by the way, I've ever heard Big Ramy just come out of his shell and say, I'm crazy, I'm living that life.
So guys, feel free to check out the entire video in the description below. But honestly, this entire conversation that Sid had with Big Ramy was really just around Big Ramy's supplement company that he's been dealing with, you know, how life has been treating him. No questions were actually asked when it comes to, will you be competing in the future? Have you retired? Nothing like that. So I went and looked in the comment section of this video, and Sid actually posted here, full disclosure, we were advised to refrain from questions about competing or the Olympia, so we wanted to respect him and his team's wishes. They were not granting access to anyone to do interviews, so we're appreciative of the access. So you guys, not even allowed to ask the question to Big Ramy about competing or if he's retired, because he has not come out and said that he is officially retired. I think it is safe to say at this point that he definitely is retired and he's focusing on other things, because like I said, that is one of the things that they talked about in this interview was the aspects of bodybuilding for Big Ramy these days in terms of business. He has his supplement company. He just opened a new gym. Obviously, competing is not on the table right now, and I don't think it ever will be for Big Ramy ever again. But maybe they just think that this is going to hurt his brand by him actually coming out and saying, no, I am no longer competing. And he is still trying to grow this supplement company. I think he only started it back in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. So I really don't know why the hesitation is there for anybody to even ask about competing, about the Olympia, but clearly Big Ramy's team still doing some, what I would think is protection of Big Ramy in particular, and I felt like they were doing this when he was competing as well. But anyway, you guys let me know what you think about this. Should Big Ramy come out and say that he is officially retired just to be able to rip off that band-aid and say, look, I've had a very successful career, I'm moving on to other things? And then we can stop asking these questions, because even as Sid had to say here, he wasn't even allowed to ask. His team specifically went to him and said, do not ask us about competing. Do not ask us about the Olympia. It does seem like Big Ramy's doing great, but I think the fans could really use, you know, a little bit of confirmation that we will not see Big Ramy on any other bodybuilding stages again. But look, you guys, I'm going to wrap up the video right here. We do have the Romania Pro coming up here in a couple of weeks. We'll have the Prague Pro shortly after that. Stay tuned for all the coverage surrounding those shows. I'm signing off for now. Thank you guys for tuning into EP09. Be sure to like and subscribe.